So let's pick up the story and tell the second half of our lightning church history survey from the Reformation to the present day. Here we go. And here is Henry VIII, a tricky character, but very, very important in terms of UK church history. So in today's video, we're going to cover the Reformation in Britain and trace its impact through to the present day. And from Henry VIII's break with Rome to the rise of nonconformist movements, modern day religious diversity, this period shows incredible shifts in British spiritual life. And some of the things that we're just going to lightly mention here are still powerful aspects of present church life in the UK today. And through the UK's influence into the world. So let's begin with one of the most important events in British church history, the Reformation. So the English Reformation started with political motivations when Henry VIII, in his quest for a male heir, broke with the Roman Catholic Church in 1534. And this led to the creation of the Church of England, as opposed to the Church of Rome, and the monarch as its supreme head. So this was not a spiritual awakening. This was a political move. This was Henry VIII wanting not only to maintain, to have a male heir and to marry whom he pleased or to live how he pleased, but it had spiritual consequences. So it had a completely secular origin, but spiritual fruit. And the political move opened the door for more radical religious changes. And there were people around Henry VIII who used this moment for something different. Thomas Cranmer, who was the Archbishop of Canterbury, introduced Protestant ideas, shaping the doctrine and shaping the liturgy of the English church pretty much to this day. And the language he used in the Book of Common Prayer remains unsurpassed. It's almost the language of Shakespeare, really. It's beautiful and well constructed, well conceived doctrinal ideas that dominated the spiritual landscape for centuries. And when I was a child, that was the language that I learned, that I spoke in church. It was the language of Cranmer. But he introduced Protestant ideas, and that remains one of the most enduring legacies of this period and set the tone for Anglican worship. Something else that Henry VIII did was to make money out of the change. And one of the cruelest and most far-reaching events of his monarchy was the dissolution of the monasteries, basically just ripping off all the big monasteries in Britain and the Roman Catholic abbeys. Remember, every church building in Britain that is over 500 years old, and there are many, there are thousands, they're all Roman Catholic buildings. They're not Church of England premises. And here are the ruins of Glastonbury Abbey, which was dissolved in 1539 following the execution of the abbot. So Henry VIII was brutal, and these places they were schools and universities, libraries, they were hospitals, they were places of hospitality, and they were wiped aside and the money taken into the power of the king. So Henry VIII did this in the name of establishing the Church of England, but did it certainly to line his own pockets, to maintain his own control, and to dominate the political scene. And it was very successful and very, very cruel, very cruel. So here we just see the ruins, and these could be replicated throughout the British Isles, the ruins of great places of learning and spirituality that once were. Meanwhile, in Scotland, the Reformation took a rather different turn. John Knox brought Calvinistic ideas from Geneva, and in 1560, Scotland officially adopted Protestantism, leading to the establishment of the Presbyterian Church, governed by elders rather than by bishops. And this set up a long-standing tension between the hierarchical Anglican tradition in England and the Presbyterian tradition in Scotland. And it's become mixed and mellowed and changed over the years, but it's still there. It's still there. There's still a strong difference between the Scottish way of doing church and the English. And then in the following century, after Henry VIII, religious conflict continued, particularly under the successors. There was almost a back and forth between Catholic and Protestant. And if it was a Catholic monarch in power, then the Protestants were burnt at the stake. If it was a Protestant, the Catholic, you know what I'm saying. And so Mary attempted to bring England back to Catholicism through persecution. And then Elizabeth tried to create a middle way. She was almost certainly Catholic in her inner private devotional life, but determined to be a political leader that held the two together. And this became the Elizabethan settlement, a middle way. Not everyone was satisfied with that. And there was a party that became called the Puritans. We use that word in a different way these days, but the Puritans were a group of radical Protestants who wanted further reforms, who wanted to be completely free of anything that was slightly Catholic. It was deeply almost racist, anti-Catholic. Okay, and their influence grew. And in the 17th century, it grew stronger and stronger, culminating in the English Civil War, where religious and political issues intertwined. And the Puritans, aligned with the parliamentarians, briefly even came to power under Oliver Cromwell. That one little moment in British history where there was no king. But Oliver Cromwell certainly acted as if he was king, abolishing the monarchy, abolishing the Anglican Church. But this was all reversed after a short time, just a short little interlude of republicanism, when Charles II, the son of Charles I, who was executed, came back to power in what's called the Glorious Restoration in 1660. And here in the picture, you can see Puritan pilgrims heading for the New World, which now we call the United States. But because of the way that the political situation had changed in Britain, seeking liberty elsewhere. So that was one of the consequences of the Puritan movement, the Civil War, and then not the expulsion of these nonconformists, but a movement out. All of these things flow into political situations, flow into the discovery of the New World, so to speak, and the move into a British Empire. All these things are awaiting and developing, and the political and the spiritual all flow together, as they do today, of course. Okay. And then the following century leads to the rise of nonconformism and the rise of nonconformist groups like the Baptists, the Quakers, and the Methodists. People who rejected the authority of the Church of England. And John Wesley was one of the most influential figures in this movement, who, alongside his brother Charles, founded Methodism in the 18th century. And that emphasized something slightly different, a personal faith and a social justice, and a break from the formalism that they saw in the Church of England. So now, John Wesley always saw himself as a member of the Church of England, for sure. But the consequences of his teaching and his practice led to something completely different from the Church of England. So it was initially a movement within Anglicanism, but it eventually became a distinct denomination that played a major role in the spiritual life of the country, particularly among the working class. It was definitely a work towards God's preference for the poor. Okay. And then moving from there into the 19th century, a whole new wave of pressure with the development of the Industrial Revolution. And in the Victorian era, the Church of England had to contend with increasing secularism, scientific advances, and industrialization. And many saw the church as disconnected from the struggles of ordinary people. And in response, Christian leaders like William Booth, founder of the Salvation Army, sought to address social ills like poverty and equality, something that Wesleyanism had started with, but had become a little too respectable for in the 19th century. But there's also a move back to Catholicism within the Oxford movement and figures like John Henry Newman, emphasizing the Christian continuity with the older traditions. So that was when Catholicism was re-allowed into the spiritual conversation, which was only towards the end of the 19th century, then there became what we see in the 20th century as a more diverse mix. So now we face new challenges, world wars, the decline of traditional church attendance, the rise of secularism, the removal of a spiritual input into education. And yet, it's also been a time of renewal, and ecumenical movements like the World Council of Churches have sought unity among Christians, and charismatic movements have brought new life into worship and practice. So today, the UK is astonishingly diverse, with growing Muslim and Hindu and Sikh populations alongside a range of streams of Christian traditions. And the Church of England remains influential and rich, though much of Britain is increasingly secular, which is where we are right now. And now something new is happening, and something wonderful, and that is the advent of churches from the, you might say, the diaspora of Christianity, the worldwide spread. And so we have missionaries coming to Britain from the East, from Africa, from South America, bringing back words that were brought to them centuries ago, and discovering a new possibility of unity and vibrancy within the Christian faith. Okay. And in the classes, we'll get into these things in much greater detail. Okay. Let's stop right there.